We have a green box, we have a live counter ticking up, so we should now be live, which of course means welcome back to the Storytime network. You may notice I am trying to speak a little bit quieter than normal. That is because I'm in my new flat, or streaming in my new flat for the first time, and try not to piss off the neighbours the first time. Potentially piss off the neighbours. I don't know if I would. Honestly, as I said, I don't know, but because as I said, I haven't. All I've heard is outside noise. I haven't heard anything from inside the building, or what I think is inside the building. So I honestly don't know. It might be as I go on, I get louder, and we'll see. Either way, we're back with Skyrim, or Skyrim in the background while we just talk shit.
So what you're telling me, Mel, is that the noise is not coming from inside the house.
Certainly not the fucking noise that woke me up this morning, where some pricks were fucking chopping branches off a tree and then sticking them through what I assume is a wood chipper, or was a wood chipper, and then fucking leaf blowing all the sawdust and shit. That was not fun to wake up to.
I bet.
Huh.
Yeah, let's talk about topical stuff. So the Screen Actors Guild is now on strike in solidarity with their own demands, and as well as the Writers Guild. So that's fun. Hollywood's going to be in for the next few months.
So what was the impetus for the SAG strike?
A combination of factors. A lot of stuff about like streaming residuals, better pay for more minor actors, as well as AI bullshit, as expected. And this one's a fun one. Apparently, one of the studio side's AI proposal to SAG-AFTRA included scanning a background actor's likeness for 1 day's worth of pay and using their likeness forever in any form without any pay or consent. Which is fucking yikes.
How did they think they could get away with that?
I don't know.
Do not know.
Probably they think that being rich gives them unlimited privilege to do whatever the fuck they want.
I just, like... I find myself increasingly having mixed feelings about AI. Because here's the thing. I think AI, when used as a time saver for otherwise tedious or like monotonous tasks, is probably the optimal use of it. Like, there are uses for AI that are good.
Well, I think the staff on the latest Spider-Verse movie, used it, and people were like, some people were up in their arms, and the rational people were like, no, they used it as it's supposed to be used. Because
what did they use it for?
I can't remember. I can't remember the specifics off the top of my head.
Probably for compositing.
Probably, yeah.
Because compositing is just like really difficult work for animators.
Yeah, that's the thing. Is just like use it for the stuff that like is too much trouble to do manually. That's fine. It's when you hand everything over to it that's the problem.
But no, fucking, shitty studio execs would rather, pay as little as possible, even if it means they're putting out absolute trash.
Yep.
And as much as I dislike the studio side of things, the consumers are not blameless.
No, they aren't.
As we've gone on about ad nauseum at this point, critical consumption is just not something that really exists, and in part well, I say that the consumers are not blameless, but it is generally the, let us say, more wealthy population that makes decisions on things like education and institutional stuff, and as a result, it has sort of been discouraged societally by those who would lose out if people, had critical thinking skills. So it's kind of difficult to assign blame in that way.
I mean, again, the blame is mostly on the rich people.
Well, that is just a matter of course at this point. But there's something to be said about not perpetuating it once you become aware of it. But like, I don't know. It's just I'm just sort of waiting for the inevitable fallout from the immediate circumstances, and then see what happens from there.
I can see that, but again, I do feel like the studios are mostly at fault for this.
Oh, 100%.
Oh no, they absolutely are. I'm not disputing that in any way. I just am more thinking in the long view. I'm wondering what effects this might have, if any.
Yeah. Of course, I saw an absolutely fucking yikes-ass take on another server, and I blocked the person who put it, because, like, yikes. Which said, basically, in a nutshell, I don't like this writer or their work, and I don't have any respect for the profession, really, whatsoever, so it's fine if they don't get paid shit. Besides, they should know what they're getting into, since creatives are almost never successful anyways.
Yeah,
So,
it's just ignorant.
I mean...
Yeah, no, it's just very yikesy.
Making sure that creators...
yeah, no, I'm fucking blocking you, thank you.
But, making sure that creators aren't successful is a very good way to make sure that there are no creators at all.
Yeah.
At which point, you don't get your 20 fucking
Your precious media.
20 fucking Marvel things a year.
No good creatives means no good media. That's just how it is.
That said, in the same way that a broken clock is right twice a day, there is one tiny kernel of truth in that statement.
What, that it's hard to be successful as a creative?
No. It's, well, were they referring to creatives in general, or the actors specifically?
In general.
Okay, then there's nothing to be said about that, because that's just nonsense. What I was gonna say is that, I do believe the top portion of actors get paid way too much.
That is correct.
Like, I can understand it from an economical point of view. After a person reaches a certain level of skill, what they're selling is not their talent, but rather their
image.
Yeah, their brand. They become sort of the product, but it just like does not sit right with me. I think like relative to how much the people working on these things get paid, I think budgets are pretty like absurd as well in the film industry. Especially because
Almost
like
half the budget goes into marketing.
Yeah, I'm just like I've always wondered like what the point is of having such a massive budget if you are grossly underpaying 90% of your cast.
And crew.
Cast and crew, that's what I meant, yeah.
Well, it's simple, Fuzzy. It's to give the big names, like the directors and the producers, a shit ton of money. Regardless if the film bombs or not.
Wait, aren't the producers people who provide part of the budget?
Yeah, but if they, I think sometimes, at least some more expensive stuff. Actually, no. Some of the producers are paid, others are not. I don't remember exactly how it shakes out.
Yeah,
I'm not super familiar with that side of the entertainment industry.
Yeah, I'm still not like entirely sure what a producer actually does.
They produce.
Like that, but they don't though.
I mean, are you talking about producer in terms of a studio or producer in terms of the actual people?
Like, producers on set are very different from, like, executive producers and stuff.
Yeah.
Executive producer, Dick Wolf. Dunk dunk.
Yeah, I'm like... I don't know, the film industry is kind of just a mess.
Oh,
absolutely. This has been known for years.
Yeah. And it, especially since streamers have come in as well, and the fucking whatchamacallit, industry has not it's grown with the times.
Well, that's the thing with most industries, right? Like any older industry is running into the problem that human society is growing faster than
they can adapt.
Yeah, and it's not like just industries; like human beings are the same.
Yep, I think we talked about this on another stream not too long ago.
Yeah, the whole humanity is changing faster than humanity can evolve. I think this is actually will function as a good segue into the topic I had prepared, but staying on the current topic for a moment. Do you think humanity is still subject to natural selection?
Depends on the part of the world you're in. I'd argue it's actually artificial selection for the most part. Due to, factors like racism and such.
Yeah, it's like definitely the formula has changed for who gets to pass their genes on.
Funny thing is, a lot of people who you think are like, oh, we should pass our genes on, are like in demographics that have a much lower fertility rate on average.
I mean, this is the premise of the film Idiocracy.
Yeah. Well, the other thing to keep in mind is that Idiocracy is, not remotely accurate scientifically. because intelligence is not like a static thing defined at birth.
So I agree with that, but at the same time, for some reason, I don't find the final state of the world in Idiocracy that hard to believe.
No, that's fair.
There's probably parts of America that are already like that.
Yeah, certain
You know.
areas that lean to a certain political axis we could definitely talk about at length, but won't.
We can just say the Bible Belt.
Okay, yeah, it's the Bible Belt.
Ah.
But yeah, no, like, I think part of that is due to religious institutions have a lot of dominance there, and a lot of politics that are aligned with religious institutions. Educated voters tend not to vote as conservative.
In general,
on
it's
average.
kind of like it's funny. The idea of separation of church and state is probably the most funny thing in American law, considering the fact that it's just patently false in every meaningful way.
Especially recently. Especially in the early days, too. Because a lot of state laws way back when were very flagrantly religiously inspired, but a lot of that was like pre-forming of the U.S. of A.
Yeah, in terms of like... But yeah, anyway, getting back to a slightly less depressing topic. Only slightly, though.
Oh boy.
It is definitely, there's two things about human selection, natural or artificial, that are interesting. Is that, despite the pushes for diversity in a lot of parts of the world, there are... The human population is becoming increasingly region-locked in terms of reproduction, in the sense that the vast majority of people are poor, right? Like, I don't think that's a controversial or refutable statement, is that the majority of Earth's population is, like, not very well off.
I'm pretty sure the top 5% of people in the world own 50% of the wealth. Might even be fewer people.
I'm not even talking about, like, the most egregious examples. I'm saying, like, even the proportion of people who are middle class are, like, not even close to the majority.
Oh yeah, no. Like I said, like the top 5% or so of people own a good half of the wealth.
Yeah, but I'm, like, I've always wondered, how much of the rest of that is, like, the next 10% over, right? Like, I have to imagine that the middle class owns... Like, I have to imagine that, like, maybe billions of people have access to about 5% of the wealth when you do the math.
Might be. It's difficult to get an exact number because of just how many people there are out there.
Yeah, there's, like, few enough billionaires and, like, truly obscenely wealthy people that you can get the stats on that more easily, but, like, it becomes a lot foggier once you get to the middle class.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so the populations are becoming increasingly region locked, and population growth is mostly coming from those region locked areas, right? Like, we talk about how like the overall population of the world is growing like incessantly.
Yep. Population growth has started to slow down, though.
That's true, and that's probably a very, very good thing. But even then, that it's just interesting how uneven the distribution is.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
you have a place like Japan that is dying, like actually dying, mostly because women have realized they don't need no man, and I say that unironically, because women are realizing that they can be independent and take care of themselves, and men are realizing they prefer the comfort of 2D waifus.
That's only a part of it. The
I
bigger
know it's
factor,
only a part of it, but it's funnier if I phrase it that way.
look, the bigger factor is, to my knowledge, just the degree to which work culture in Japan has deteriorated to such a horrific degree. Because like there are just so many young people who do not have the time to so much as go out on a date to look for a partner because their work is just so there's just so much that they have, and at the end of their day they either have almost no time left for any any sort of going out social activity type stuff, or they just
they're just so tired that they would rather
they'd rather just
play.
spend the time in and just
They'd rather play a visual novel and
not even
get
necessarily
it.
that. Just
Look,
like
I'm just trying to blame the weebs and the degenerates. Okay, give me that.
look, you don't have to go full. Look, you don't have to go full Shinzo Abe, Fuzzy. I get it.
Okay, now that's just insulting.
Okay, yeah, fair. I'm sorry.
But no, I'm kind of just like, but yeah, so somewhere like Japan, probably parts of North America as well, is just like the population is declining in a lot of parts of the world, and is
So, America actually has not fallen below its replacement rate, but that's because of the large amount of immigration we still get every year.
yeah. You have to remember to ignore that and focus for the purposes of this discussion. It's entirely the birth rate that we're focusing on.
Oh, birth rate in particular, yeah. The U.S. is not at the replacement rate anymore, I don't think. Let me look that up, actually. I'm going to look that up, because I have a computer right in front of me.
Yeah, it's funny how that works. But yeah, basically, the population is growing unevenly across the world, and it's probably not going to have an effect in our lifetime, but I am very curious about what sort of effects that might have in the long term.
So I've actually looked at this up, and on average, what should we call it? The birth rate has been slowing. The population growth rate has been slowing down, but overall, scholars don't expect it to peak and start either leveling out or declining until the end of the 21st century.
Barring World War III.
Yes. So the U.S. has a fairly low birth rate compared to a lot of other countries in the world. You'll never guess which regions has the highest birth rate.
Is it the Bible Belt?
No, I don't mean in America. I mean in the world.
I'm gonna make a wild guess here and say somewhere in Asia, and I know how much of a cop-out that is because
You are incorrect,
Asia
actually. It is sub-Saharan Africa.
I was going to
Really?
go Africa, yeah.
this is gonna be one of the two. I have to imagine like Asia is second.
Yeah. So actually, most Asian countries are on the lower end. The highest population growth rates are almost entirely concentrated in Africa, except for a couple high spots in Asia, Oceania, and maybe one or two in Latin America.
Yeah, that's not really surprising at all.
So looking at the world population review, the highest birth rate belongs to Niger at 47.28 births per 1,000 people. The lowest birth rate belongs to Monaco at 6.63 per 1,000. Japan is fourth
Monaco.
lowest.
Monaco, not Monaco.
Monaco? Okay.
Monaco.
Yeah, Japan is fourth lowest, and South Korea is second lowest.
Well, Monaco makes perfect sense because it's not really like
It's a microstate, isn't it?
yeah, it's like not really and it's hard to I don't know how to articulate
It's
this,
not a
but
country
like
proper, per se.
look, you said it, not me.
I
But
thought
yes,
it
it's
was.
The one between South Korea and Japan is Andorra, by the way.
I lack I do not have enough information about Andorra to make a comment, but it's funny how South Korea and Japan both have incredibly toxic work culture, and
Yep.
as a population is low, huh?
Yeah, no, funny that. Greece is is number 6. Taiwan's number 5. And then it's Puerto Rico, Portugal, Spain, and Bulgaria. I don't know if they should really put Puerto Rico there because Puerto Rico is still a U.S. territory. It's weird.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it's like distinct enough from the rest of the U.S. that it's like
Yeah, I suppose.
it merits its own. Because like, if you go by that logic, you'd have to you'd get very inconsistent numbers considering how much the spread is in the U.S.
Yep. So take a wild guess and guess which how many of the top 10 are from Africa versus other parts of the world for highest. I guess.
Conservatively, I'd guess 7 out of 10.
What do you think, Mill?
Sorry, what was the question? I'm focusing on dialogue at the moment.
Of the top 10 most populated countries with the highest birth rates, what proportion do you think are African countries?
Ooh, I would probably go pretty high as well. Certainly a majority.
I guessed 7.
Yeah, I'd probably say about 7. I know
It's all of them.
all of them. Wow. Okay. I mean, it makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Trying to see what the exact birth rate is for the good old US of A.
Okay, now this is gonna sound bad, but there's no way of phrasing this nicely. I don't suppose these numbers take infant mortality into account, do they?
I don't know. I haven't looked at that. United States is at 12.4, by the way. This is births. This is the birth rate, not the survival rate.
Yeah, no.
This is literally just the... This is not the same as like the total fertility rate or the replacement rate or what have you.
Mm.
The
Yeah,
United States is at a 12.4 per 1,000 people, which is pretty low. But still not so low as to, go below the replacement rates. Because I don't believe US deaths exceed that at all.
Yeah, it's but yeah, but getting back to the question of selection after our birth rate tangent, because of how dispersed, relatively speaking, the pockets of increasing population are, and because of how
Okay, I think the
different-
US death rate is like a little under 8 per 1,000 people per year. So yeah, it's still above the replacement rate. Sorry, continue.
But given that selection is sort of the rules have changed ever since society has come into existence, because at this point it's not only a matter of suitability but also societal suitability, right? Like, society imposes artificial restrictions on selection, and even then, there's enough of a population that's able to ignore optimal conditions when selecting a partner. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. I think.
Like, as surprising as it may be, there are human beings who are not entirely ruled by their nether regions. Shocking, I know.
I know.
So that is one of those things that probably does also affect the gene pool going forward. And I think it's in some ways it's interesting because it certainly makes for a more diverse gene pool than going with the strictly biologically optimal options at all times.
I mean, so I do think, like, leaning too much on the idea of, like, intelligence or something more abstract being, like, something that can be determined by natural selection is a little too close to eugenics for my comfort.
No, that's not what I'm talking about at all.
Oh, okay.
I'm talking about, like, physical characteristics.
Oh, yeah, no. Well, those two can be altered to some degree. Not all the way,
but they're much more dependent on genetics. Like, your floor is the same for everyone, but your ceiling is mostly determined genetically.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, based on your genes, no matter how much you tried, you're not going to grow taller than a certain amount.
Yeah, your
Like,
height's kind of
flexible.
set.
Yeah, it is somewhat flexible, right? Like,
it is.
There are things that can affect it, like not just like diet
Malnutrition
and
can
exercise.
make you a lot shorter than you would be otherwise, for example.
But the upper bound is bounded genetically for the most part. Or you get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And it's things like that. I'm not talking about the more abstract stuff. I'm just talking about like the very obviously physical characteristics.
Mm-hmm.
And it is more interesting when you have a bit more diversity in that regard because you're not going for the strictly optimal thing. And the thing is, what our instincts tell us is optimal is not necessarily optimal because of societal reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like,
Like an attractive person might not be an ideal partner because of financial or personality reasons, for instance.
Exactly, right? Like, uh, one of the benefits of society, and I know we harp on about the problems that society has brought. One of the benefits of society is that, at the very least, people have the option of being less shallow.
Mm-hmm.
Now, granted, like with many rights, many people don't really make use of that, and choose to use attractiveness as their only selection criteria.
AKA the if evil, why hot phenomenon.
The what now?
The if evil, why hot arguments I've seen so recently.
Yes. Yes. Though one might also argue that the evil makes them hotter for many people.
That's a personal preference thing.
Yeah, that's not really my bag, but I do understand it to a certain extent.
I get it to some degree, but I think a lot of times people who are evil and hot are hot in spite of the evil, not because of it.
Yeah, that just comes down to a personal taste thing. But yeah, but yeah, what I'm basically trying to say is that while attractiveness is somewhat subjective, I would say base physical attractiveness is something that is at least in large part instinctual.
Mm-hmm.
Just it's a quirk of biology more than anything else.
Indeed.
But the fact that humans have
Quirks of biology.
no, sapiens. The fact that human beings have sapiens, even though many members of our species choose not to use their sapiens, that doesn't mean they don't have it.
True. Some people, and some people are all too fond of fucking around and finding out, as it were.
But yes, and that brings me to the topic I had prepared for the day.
Oh?
What is love?
Baby, don't hurt me. Don't hurt
Yes.
me. No more.
Yeah.
Were you setting that one up, or was that just an accident?
No, well, it's not that it was intentionally set up, but we have reached a state of cultural, we've reached a mimetic critical mass with that phrase that you cannot say that phrase without the song lyric follow-up anymore.
Yeah, no, it's always like, either someone follows it up, or like, an opportunity has been missed.
I wonder how many people are referencing the actual song or the Eminem song that used that chorus.
I've heard neither. And I'm pretty sure a lot of people have heard neither as well. They just know.
I have not heard the Eminem one. I have heard the other one. What is love? Baby, don't hurt me.
Because I'd only heard the Eminem one for quite a while.
Mm.
And I've only heard the memes.
The memes are fun, to be fair.
Yes, we are a very mimetic species.
Do it for the meme, yeah.
Very mimetic generation. Or pair of generations, as the case may be.
To be fair, memes are not anything new. Memes have been around for a while, ever since there's been mass culture.
Look, don't get into that, because then we're going to have to play that one Metal Gear Rising Revengeance clip.
Nanomachine, son.
No. No, one of the bosses, has an entire monologue about memes being the currency of the soul, or something.
That's so fucking funny.
Fucking Kojima.
Who wrote that game again? Was it who I think it was?
I don't know if Kojima wrote it.
But he produced it, didn't he?
So Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance is very contentious because it's like Metal Gear Rising is like a child born during the divorce proceedings, as it were. It's extremely divided as to how much of it is owned by who is responsible for how much. It's a very it's probably the best game that's been under the worst circumstances relatively speaking. But yeah, anyway, in the point of my point with talking about selection, natural and artificial, is that natural selection in particular, does not have an emotional component. And that's why, as sapient creatures who are by and large driven by emotion as opposed to rationality, which is sadly not really contentious. I'm pretty sure everyone in academia has basically come to the conclusion, as much as we would like to say we are a rational species, we are mostly driven by emotion. One might actually argue that rationality is more animalistic than emotion is. Because when you talk about base instincts, those are mostly instincts to ensure survival. And as a result, they have to be rational. That's actually an entirely different subject, is like, what does constitute a base instinct and what doesn't? And how that affects human beings. But yeah, what I'm talking about, like, is and you actually got me thinking about this from our conversation about 100 Girlfriends on Tuesday.
Oh, okay.
So and this is difficult because this is going to vary by culture and by age and demographic, and it's like, it is very, very hard to define the basic coupling arrangement of human beings in the 21st century.
So I'm pretty sure, at least evolutionarily, I think that's the word to use.
Yes.
But before we had, like, society as it is now, humans were a loosely polyamorous, somewhat kind of sexual relationship, a lot like some primates. Though there did seem to be at least some degree of monogamy in early human cultures.
Well, you also have to remember that early tribal humanity, like hunter-gatherer humanity, the tribes tended to be a bit more egalitarian in general. And as a result, it was more of a, especially because in the case of, like, a lot of the arguments for monogamy are based around child rearing, and that's only relevant when the community as a whole is not participating in rearing the child, or children in general.
Yeah, communal child rearing has been a thing for, was a thing long ago.
Yeah, it's actually become less common as time went on. Which is probably
weird.
Well, it's not really, because as society developed and as lines began to be drawn between individuals, it's basically the principle is collectivism versus individualism, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
as individuality became more prevalent, and I'm not saying individuality is a bad thing, but
No.
sacrifices did have to be made for the development of individuality, and communal child rearing was probably one of them.
I mean, there have still been societies and cultures that have engaged in communal
There
child
still are, yes,
Yeah.
and they tend to be in the more collectivist parts of the world.
Yeah,
In
and a lot of them are also substantially more isolated as well.
But yeah, but basically what I've been trying to say is that, like, I'm talking about coupling behavior in the modern day. I think, at least in the West, let's take a smaller sample size because we lack the data to talk about the entire world. And even with the West, we're spitballing, but like at least we live here, so we have an understanding. In the West, it seems to me that traditionally the culturally acceptable, the most widely societally accepted dynamic in the modern Western world is serial monogamy.
Yes.
Right? The idea that you can, like, be with multiple partners, but like, it's preferred not to be with multiple partners at the same time.
Yes.
That's
what made the whole romancing the widow is such a popular trope in a lot of media. At least to some degree.
And I think about this sometimes. There probably are parts of the world where, like, true full-on monogamy is still practiced by necessity rather than by desire.
How you figure?
Because, like, there are parts of the world where the culture, whether religiously or for religious reasons or otherwise, requires monogamy, and also people just don't have the luxury to be picky about their partners.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of just, like, they marry who their families arrange them to marry. Because, like, remember, people speak out about arranged marriage, but, like, that is very much still an extremely prevalent part of many cultures. Is marriage is a way of sort of repaying the societal, like, the debt you incur to your parents for them raising you.
Mm-hmm.
Which is a very weird mutation of human behavior that I'm never really sure how to feel about. This idea that you incur a debt to your parents because they raised you, even though you coming into existence and being raised had nothing to do with your consent. Right?
Mm-hmm.
It's one of those things that maybe I'm just like, it's because it's the Zoomer in me talking, the whole
we exist without a consent type thing.
Yes, but, like, just the idea that you incur a debt to your parents seems to just throw out the idea that it is a parent's duty to raise their children somewhat well if they, like, they have that responsibility because they brought you into the world.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, to sort
to
of
refuse that is to abandon your responsibility.
And to I mean, you can refuse it as long as you make sure the child is raised somehow.
Yeah, exactly.
But if you bring a life into the world, then you have to make some arrangements.
Unless, of
Otherwise,
course, you are forced to bring life into the world, in which case it's a bit more of a murky topic.
in that case, no. Then in that case, everyone's a victim except the person who forced it. In that case, there's only one person who's not a victim.
Yeah.
Generally. Well,
sometimes it's more than one.
Yeah, sometimes there are circumstances where neither parent is a willing participant. Sadly.
Oh yeah.
So
those are not particularly fun.
Yeah, but getting away from the darker topics, it's like, I just never understood this. I was gonna say it is the sort of encapsulation of the generational relationship between boomers and their later generations. The sort of passing of blame from the older individuals to the younger individuals. It's just like, if you're gonna blame your children, then don't have children.
Yep.
It's really
But no, Fuzzy, see, they have to have children, otherwise they're not normal members of society.
God, like, I know you say that in a sarcastic tone, but like it is just a pain to think about in many ways. But yeah. We're striking upon a lot of interesting tangents, even though it's not really what I was going for. But yeah, for a lot of places, arranged marriage is still very much a thing, and you're basically, unless you are in a position of privilege, you don't really have the option of serial monogamy.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You just get with who, and of course, like, cheating still happens. I'm not saying that, like,
so one thing with that is that if it's an arranged marriage and it's supposed to be just like a professional thing or a contract thing, and it's like not really something with any emotional attachment, and there's an understanding between both parties involved that there will be extramarital relationships, then that's one thing. I'm pretty sure that's how it was in Renaissance era France. But I don't know. Cheating is still wrong for the most part.
Yeah, well, that's the important thing. Is like the important factor is that understanding that there will not be any extramarital relations, right? It's just like,
yeah, most marital relationships you go in with the assumption that it's going to be an exclusive relationship.
And so in those cases, I mean, again, a lot of the problems that arise in the inability to engage in serial monogamy also apply to extramarital relations, because, like, if you're already just, like, struggling to survive, you're just not going to have the time or energy for extramarital relations.
Mm-hmm.
So... But by and large, the socially accepted norm is serial monogamy.
Mm-hmm.
And again,
unless you're French for some reason.
Look,
you think I'm joking, but like apparently some French people legitimately thought that Bill Clinton cheating on his wife was a sign that he's a really cool, powerful dude.
Look, we are not here to talk about the weirdness of the French unless Mill initiates that conversation.
You know what? Fair. Mill, do you want to talk about how weird the French are?
I don't think I really can. The British are just as weird.
Fair enough.
I mean, what I will say is they were dumb in World War II for relying on I think it was the Maginot Line.
Maginot Line, yes.
That was dumb of them, but otherwise, anything they've done, we've probably done worse.
Oh, almost certainly. I mean, if we're talking about colonialism and imperialism...
Yeah, but it's a good thing we're not talking about them right now, because we're talking about human beings trying to break away from the constant pull of their nether regions.
I mean, look, if we are going to talk about that, I'd just like it known that while, yes, Britain was the main colonial power, of course, we were not the only ones, and the other...
Oh, I never said...
Yeah, no, I'm not saying you were, but, everyone seems to blame Britain for pretty much every colonial, massacre and tragedy in history.
I mean, if we're talking during the colonial period, Spain was actually worse, but during the imperial period, Britain was probably the worst offender.
Look.
But I'm splitting hairs.
Look, Spain, France, Britain, Belgium were also pretty fucking bad.
Belgium and the Congo is just like... I don't understand how people in the Congo can legitimately just... people in Belgium, rather, can legitimately ignore the atrocities that their country committed in the Congo.
Probably the same way that Japanese people ignore what they did on the continent. They're not taught about it. Because they would...
Yeah, I guess.
Because they would...
But anyway, look, we're not here to talk about that today. We've already talked about it at length.
Kind of my specialty, so...
Fair enough. If need be, we can talk about it another time, but we don't have to.
Hell, I have my notes now. I could actually give proper examples.
Look, Mel, we're talking about my specialty today.
Fair enough.
Horny stuff?
Well, no, it's being curious about horny stuff. Because of my understanding of horny stuff. You have to make that distinction, right? Because, like, it's basically an academic thing for me, and that's not and you do know more than anyone else that that's not like a euphemism. It is like legitimately.
No, I know.
I'm coming at it from a place of scientific curiosity, or just like trying to understand, because I just don't get it in large part. But yeah. So serial monogamy is the socially accepted thing for the most part, and that is where my questions about love and emotional attachment come in. So, like, I think it's something important to remember is that emotions are in many ways emergent phenomenon.
Mm-hmm.
What I mean by that is, while there are definitely brain regions and like hormones and chemicals that correspond to emotions, that doesn't really explain or account for the general complexities in human emotion.
Yep.
Which is why, like, on a certain level, I can understand the, like, infuriating people who are like, oh, well, love is just the Big Bang Theory energy, if you will.
Oh God, like the love is always just serotonin.
Well, actually, it's more oxytocin than serotonin.
Yeah, I know.
But,
I know.
Basically,
yes.
A chemical in the brain is,
Yes, and well, while that is definitely a factor, it's really more complicated than that.
Mm.
Yep.
Which is what a lot of those know-it-all, wannabe brainy types kind of miss out on, is that, like, there are a lot of extenuating circumstances and external and internal factors that determine what love is and what form it takes.
Mm-hmm.
And this is especially relevant to the concept of romantic love, as opposed to the less weird kinds of love. I say this as a very likely aromantic person who is still capable of experiencing, like, the platonic forms of love, but the romantic kind completely escapes my understanding.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's like siblings, parents, children, friends. Platonic love is like just a thing. And what sort of complicates my understanding of romantic love, which I don't have much of an understanding of in the first place, is that it seems inherently more volatile than the platonic forms of love. Do you get what I'm saying?
No, I get what you're saying.
It's because a platonic relationship has ups and downs, but for the most part, it is something that is not difficult to maintain as long as it's amiable, right? Like, as long as it's not like a toxic relationship, it's not something that really just goes away with time. As long as there's like contact, of course, like obviously distance and lack of contact does have an effect, but as long as you're like as long as you like see each other relatively often, or at least communicate with each other relatively often, and are not like hostile to each other, platonic love is kind of like steady, right? It like just it sticks around.
Not always. Like, I've had
French.
French.
Yeah, friendships are more of a mixed bag because of well, I'll get into the reasons why I believe that's more of a mixed bag. But yeah, when it comes to like family, as long as you have a good relationship with your family, it's kind of hard to just like detach yourself from them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, assuming you're not like some form of sociopath, right? Like that's in a separate thing entirely. But as long as you're like have a decent capacity for emotion and you have a decent relationship with your family, the platonic love kind of just remains.
Yep.
As is, and it's why, to me, as that is the only form of love I've ever experienced and probably will ever experience. That is why romantic love in serial monogamy sort of confuses me. Because I'm kind of just like, and the reason I got to thinking about this is you brought up an example from 100 Girlfriends where a few of the girls in question had previously been in relationships and were just as sort of insane about those relationships as they are about the current one.
Mm-hmm.
And that sort of I have no problem believing that it's a thing that can happen. I'm just sort of confused as to the mechanism of how it happens. Because, like, obviously fiction is one thing, but just the idea of having that level of emotional attachment to someone and then just not doing that anymore, and then just being able to, like, I almost want a, like, what I'm curious about is how people have that level of emotional capacity. Like how do you have enough fuel for that, as it were?
Mm-hmm.
Because to me, it is mostly an issue of allocating resources, and at least how I see it is like once a relationship ends, it's not as simple as just retrieving the resources you had allocated towards that relationship. At least for me. Yeah,
Honestly,
so
no. It's a whole thing. Like, especially if it's a deeper relationship, it takes time to move on.
but yeah, and I think it's just because I'm like, I probably just have a lower emotional capacity than a lot of people. But for me, the rate of replenishment is basically non-existent. Once I've like allocated resources, I'm kind of like, that has a permanent effect on me, which is why it's so confusing to me to see people who can like devote themselves to a relationship and then exit that relationship and then devote themselves to another relationship. I don't know that I'd have the capacity for that, even if I had the. Well, I don't think I'd have the resources for that, even if I had the capacity.
Mm.
And that's why it's so confusing to me, and it's why. And I think I don't know how much of the population who has a preference for sort of for true monogamy in their media is coming from at it from that angle. But basically, to me, when you have characters who are sort of in a relationship, having had prior relationships for me, it's harder for me to empathize simply because I just can't comprehend the resource management there, and as a result, it breaks immersion for me. Which is why in media I tend to prefer the whole tropes like single target sexuality and just like that sort of thing, because I'm just like, I cannot properly. It's like, again, it's the whole describing color to a blind person thing. I can't like wrap my head around the ability of a person to devote just as much emotional resources to a relationship that they have to a past relationship that has since ended. That just does not compute for me. And that's why I'm very curious about the whole like societal structure of serial monogamy in general, because obviously in the way that society is structured, that serial monogamy is not really it's not really a what's the word, consistent amount of investment from relationship to relationship, right? There will naturally be shallower relationships and deeper relationships, and I'm even for the same individual, which is why I'm just like, it's just very confusing to me, and like the math does not seem to check out, and I think the issue is that I'm trying to turn it into math when it's probably not
the
as
math
simple.
ain't mathing because it's not math.
And that's just what I don't understand.
It's just not something that's really tangible and can be measured. Which I know it's not something you want to hear because you don't enjoy having to deal with stuff that can't be measured, but it is how it is.
Yeah.
Like, if we could quantify these emotions, well, I don't think things would necessarily be better, but things would be a lot easier to understand for a lot of people.
Oh, definitely, right? Like, people like the. I know people are always going on about quantum gravity, but like, I feel like on an immediate practical level, quantum emotions would be much more useful for a lot of people. We should get people on that. We should like move people away from quantum gravity and have them on quantum emotions, even though they're completely separate fields that have nothing to do with each other. Now I just want a bunch of astrophysicists to, like, be forced to participate in a psychology panel and see what happens.
Pick apart
Feel
their
like
brains, yeah.
That would be kind of hilarious, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm kind of just like very curious about this, because I know that's not... So for me, that's where I'm coming from. I do know that where a lot of people are coming from is the idea that if you've been in a relationship before, you're ruined for future relationships, which is just like the most medieval nonsense that is somehow still prevalent. Right? Like, am I wrong in saying that's still a relatively prevalent attitude in a lot of people?
What's a particularly prevalent attitude?
The medieval thought of, if you've been in a relationship before, then you are ruined for future relationships.
Oh yeah, no, that's fucking stupid.
Stupid, but not uncommon. Sadly.
Yeah, no, I blame that. It's mostly a religious/cultural thing. Like, I blame in no small part, like, several dominant religions have that as, like, an enforced philosophy, particularly Christianity and Islam, as well as a lot of, like, collectivist cultures in, especially, Asia, and, a little bit in, America, and quite a lot of America as well, being real.
Yeah, it's the whole societal version complex. The what? What were you saying, Jack?
It's a purity thing. Like, they're obsessed with purity.
Which is just like... that's another thing that is...
It's also a double standard, because it's very specifically female sexual purity that they're obsessed with.
That's the other thing I was going to say. But, like, it's also something that's just like... Do you know how filthy and disgusting the human body is? Purity in general
I
is
have
not...
one.
Huh? Yeah, no,
I know
exactly.
I have one.
Yeah. Purity is not something I associate with human beings, regardless of their state. Like, for me, it's like, the idea of purity is much more of a literal thing as opposed to the conceptual thing, and, like, you're basically filthy from the day you're born to the day you die.
Mm-hmm.
Human body is gross, y'all. So
It's
many
gross,
fluids.
but it's gross as long as you think of it that way, but you can also see a lot of parts of the human body as beautiful things. It's a matter of perspective, really.
Well, no, I'm like... It's fine when you're just looking. It's the touching I have a problem with.
That might just be a you thing, Fuzzy. Well, not necessarily exclusive to you. I know there are plenty of other people who are also touch-averse for a variety of reasons.
Yeah, it's like, it's not necessarily an asexual thing either, right? Like, there's just a lot of people who are not asexual but are still touch-averse. Misophonia is a thing.
Yep.
And one moment, I'll be right back.
I imagine you've been content to just be here silently because you've been trying to stay quiet the whole time anyways, right, Milt?
I mean, you're talking about stuff that is very much not my specialty.
That is also fair.
You were talking about stuff that is very much more your specialty. Come to me about fucking, when we touched upon colonialism for a couple of seconds, that was when I was interested in speaking up, but, brain chemistry really is not, is not something I have any level of knowledge for, because it's not something that I have studied.
That's fair.
Now and it's not something that I especially think about either. But I mean, it's interesting to a certain extent for sure. But yeah, it's not like I have much of an opinion for it. Not to mention, I've been kind of stuck on this fucking place. Because the way that I had to go was through a pile of fucking sand. Because this game is, by fucking Bethesda, and they are very bad at making non-glitchy games. So,
I mean, that's why there's so mods in Skyrim, and I assume other Bethesda games as well.
yeah, I'm fairly sure that Fallout has them as well.
Mm-hmm.
Can't get that way. Yeah, I mean, if we want to go back to colonialism while we're waiting for Fuzzy.
Sure.
I mean, to be fair, most of my study on it was in the post-colonial period, and that was mostly in Africa. So I can't really speak to what the Spanish did.
Yeah, Spanish's colonial efforts were very heavily focused in the Americas.
Because yeah, I'm fairly sure that the British and the Spanish basically went, this is your area, this is our area, stay away from each other.
That's how it was with a lot of European powers in North America at the time.
Because yeah, look at this. How am I supposed to know? I'm supposed to go through there.
Do not know.
But yeah, the Spanish in particular wanted nothing to do with Britain after the Armada, after we sunk the Armada. So, sods to them. That does remind me of quite a funny skit from or sketch from a comedian called Al Murray, who has basically an on-stage persona as called the pub landlord, and basically he is sort of your stereotypical, certainly back in the day, proud to be British English, or proud to be English person. Before it took a more, sinister turn in the sort of last, let's say, 5-10 years or so. And he did a sketch basically saying Britain has defeated every country in the world, at warfare, basically.
Oh yeah, no, that's not really true.
No, and that's the point. It's not true, but the point is that Al Murray is also a historian, and has the historical knowledge to basically, take the events and twist them to his persona's, advantage, sort of thing. It's, as I said, it's a very funny sketch as long as you don't take it seriously. That's the point. What he's saying shouldn't be taken seriously, but obviously, people don't understand the meaning of the word satire anymore. if they ever did, frankly. But as I said, it's a very funny sketch from the perspective of, yeah, he's completely bullshitting this. But, obviously, do have to take into account the fact that, as we've said before, people don't understand this sort of thing, and therefore, it's the Rick Sanchez problem of
like people think Rick Sanchez is supposed to be like this admirable genius, but no, he's an asshole.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're supposed to see him as a toxic asshole,
Mm-hmm.
and if you don't see him like that, then you're kind of missing the points.
Yeah. But yeah, so like, obviously I can't watch the clip while we're on stream, but I'm looking for maybe a transcript of it. But something like saying that certain countries were colonies of other countries that we defeated, and therefore we defeated them, sort of thing.
That's just like the dumbest proxy bullshit.
Oh, absolutely. As I said, it's it's not. As I said, it's not meant to be correct. He's doing it. He's in a persona. He doesn't actually believe it, or at least I'm fairly sure he doesn't believe it. He certainly, from everything I've seen outside of his persona, he's a very intelligent man, and a very funny man. But that, as I said, that's sort of the point of it. He's coming up with complete bullshit. I think somebody mentioned Canada, and it was like, well, they're part of the Commonwealth, so obviously they lost to us somehow.
No. Yeah, no.
As I said, it's
only
bullshit.
necessarily only technically lost if you count all the Native American tribes that were slaughtered and subjugated.
As I said, it's complete. It's not complete bullshit, because there are at least a couple of examples that he brings up. One of which is the United States of America that are actually truthful. But he, as I said, he's taking history and twisting it to prove his persona's point, and he's able to do that because he is a qualified historian.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, technically, in the last conflict between the US and Britain, we did mostly come out on top.
Yeah, the War of 1812 is a iffy thing to discuss because it's not real. A lot of aspects of that war are really unclear. Or rather, it was just like a really dumb dust-up to begin with.
Oh no, it was horrifically dumb, and frankly, Britain had much larger issues to deal with in 1812.
Yeah. Tough to say, it wasn't really a proper
war now.
No.
But the Americans claimed it as such because, they kind of needed the win.
Yeah.
I mean, what was
the first war that first war outside of against another proper country, I believe, was the American-Mexican War in the 1840s. At least the first one after independence.
Hmm. The NPC I was supposed to talk to just disappeared.
Oh, that's fun.
Like, straight up disappeared. Oh no, he went to sleep. Okay.
That's funny.
But yeah, again, if you can take this guy's persona to be believed, which maybe could, maybe couldn't. Some of the things he's saying will actually be real.
Persona.
So
Sorry.
Yeah, some of the things he says will actually be true. But we won the war. You all sued for peace and then won a battle after peace had been agreed on, because information took a while to travel back then.
Mm-hmm.
And as I said, I can't remember 100%, but that does line up.
It was Battle of New Orleans with good old Andrew Jackson being the general at the time for that battle.
Certainly that seems to line up with something. As I said, I vaguely remember something like that being mentioned in one of my modules, but it certainly wasn't like a module that was focused on that sort of thing. So I think if I was to put a name to the module I'm thinking of, it was the US and the Middle East. And I think it was sort of, talking more about the reason why the US sort of needed a win in the so-called Middle East. Because I'm gonna keep harping on about it. It's bullshit. The Middle East, it's complete bullshit.
Unfortunately, we don't really have a proper term to describe the whole area.
No.
Outside of that.
Because the point is, it's not only is it horrifically defined in terms of which countries count as the Middle East. It's the Middle East from the perspective of Britain as the preeminent map makers at the time. Certainly in terms of English maps, anyway. For a country like Japan, it'd be more like the Middle West, wouldn't it?
I guess the closest thing we have a proper term to it is Southwest Asia, but even then that discounts all the stuff in North Africa that also would be similarly culturally.
As I said, the point is it's an area that shouldn't really be defined together, because it is far too diverse to classify together.
You know what? I have learned recently that, well, not recently, but based off stuff I've learned throughout my time as someone who enjoys reading about history and such, it's real. One of the biggest lessons I've come away with is don't let the British draw the maps.
Yeah, that was a bad one on us, on our part.
The Middle East in particular, and Africa as well, were really screwed over by British map makers.
I mean,
and also the partition with India and Pakistan.
Yeah, that was the one where I was gonna go. You're not gonna bring up that one?
Yeah, no, I was thinking like, what else am I forgetting? There was definitely a big example I'm forgetting. All right.
Yeah, no, that was a
fustercluck.
I freely admit that British colonialism has caused quite a bit of damage around the world.
Yep.
If nothing else, it gave us the United States of America.
I mean, you can't really blame the United States for all of the world's problems either.
No, but I can blame them for the problems that they are, the problems they have caused, and there's quite a few of them. You've got to admit, Jack.
I'm not saying we haven't committed any, we aren't guilty of any problems. I'm just saying, laying every problem in the world at our feet is, like, disingenuous.
No, obviously. Not every single problem in the world, but, more problems than, perhaps the United States will care to admit to, let's say. I'm not saying you personally, Jack. I'm saying, those fuckers with the flags who believe every word out of fucking DeSantis or Trump's mouth.
Yep.
Basically, I'm saying the Republicans, but even to a certain extent, the Democrats as well. America is a very weird country in just how patriotic it is.
Yeah.
The
thing is, nationalism as well is a very relatively recent thing in the grand scheme of things. I believe it only really started around like the late 1800s, early 1900s.
To a certain extent, the idea of other countries, certainly on a global scale, was not as much of a factor until only a couple of hundred years before that, and easy access to those countries really came in in the 20th century at the latest, if not maybe a little bit earlier. I'm not 100% sure on that factor. But as I said, American patriotism was founded on, was basically the founding principle of America. It was the city on a hill principle, from that very first speech on the fucking boat.
Good old American exceptionalism.
Yep. And they've never really, America has never really moved away from that, despite the fact that it's been shown to be flawed so many times. It's it's part of the reason, I'm sure, why the Confederacy was such an issue, because they will have believed that they could do no wrong, and to imply that slavery was a wrong was to imply that the foundations that America was built on, because America was built on slave labor, to say that the foundations that America was built on were wrong, and that would therefore disprove this idea that America is a shining example to every other country in the world.
Honestly, it still boggles my mind how some people just outright deny that slavery was one of the things that America was founded on. Like, it very much is.
Yeah.
They even wrote it into the Constitution.
Yeah.
What with the 3/5 compromise and all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think you'd find a reasonable person who wouldn't believe that, but that's the qualifier, isn't it? Reasonable. There just aren't enough reasonable people in America, and to a certain extent, part of that has to be on the education system, because to be fair, Britain is not a huge amount better. It takes a while to actually learn about the stuff that Britain did wrong, and even then it's never really covered in that much detail, certainly not before university level. I'm trying to think. Year 7 was basically medieval history. Year 8 was I think Industrial Revolution. I think we covered a bit of the slave trade, but the fact is that because we never really took slaves into Britain, we just sort of shipped them around the various colonies. We've got a very convenient excuse laid out there, of well, we didn't actually have slaves in Britain, so we weren't really slavers, were we? Yes, we were. One of the main colonial powers. We kidnapped people from Africa and shipped them to the fucking to America and the Caribbean.
Yeah, the only thing that it really has going for it in its favor over America with that regard is that it abolished the slave trade earlier.
It abolished the slave trade. It didn't abolish slavery. Slavery was actually technically legal in Britain for a lot longer than it should have been, because that's the point. They never made it to fucking Britain.
Yeah.
So why would we abandon it? when I say a lot longer than it should have, I do mean, like, pretty fucking recently. I can't remember the exact year it was. Give me a second, I'll Google it. That's a good thing about being in my flat rather than the workshop where I've been for the last, let's say 8-9 months. I actually have internet now, or wireless internet, so I can Google things on my phone.
So, we talking about geopolitics now, or what?
Yeah, we're talking about geopolitics because Mel wasn't really wasn't really as able to follow our, brain chemical stuff as well.
Mm-hmm.
Look,
Which,
everyone has differing specialties. It's just
Yeah.
like a funny coincidence that you and me have the same, at least educational background,
Mm-hmm.
which is, it's a. Though there's a joke to be made here about like psychology majors. There's a number of jokes to be made here about psychology majors. Take your pick, honestly.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I've been told it's a useless major, but, like, fuck those people who say that. Go get therapy, you dingus.
Well, if they got therapy, they probably wouldn't call it a useless major.
You're right. But getting therapy would require them to actually be self-aware.
Yeah, that's what I meant, yeah. But, no, well, psychology is like, the problem with it is that it's a foundational major at the bachelor's level. So, that's like the opposite of useless, but if you're ignorant, it looks the same.
Yes.
Because, like, to make practical use of it, you do need, like, a master's or a doctorate.
Yeah.
Like, a master's at minimum. And even then, you're gonna have to...
You're a bit more limited on your options.
Yeah.
You can only really do, like, a research career or, like, an MFT or something like that. Which, honestly, I would love going into research. Psychology research sounds fun, but I have a different path charted out for me nowadays. If I could take advantage of that path, that would be fucking great, but won't be easy.
Yeah, life does have a tendency to get in the way. I have, like, another many years of school ahead of me, still.
Yeah, I have a path to a very secure, well-paying career if I can manage to get through all the hurdles to get there. The issue is I have to take a test to even be eligible, and then I have to go to an academy. So yeah, that's fun. But I won't bore you with the specifics, unless you want to hear about them.
I would love to hear about the specifics, but perhaps not on stream.
Yes, that is
It's
fair.
one of those things that you might not necessarily want to...
Advertise, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, the career I would be going into would be a pretty good one, especially if I can get the position one of the positions I want. It's just, there's a lot of stuff over the intervening couple years I'll need to do first. That will take time.
In my case, I'm kind of just like, well, gonna get my bachelor's, and I'm gonna get my master's, then I'm gonna get my PhD, and then that's kind of as far as I've thought.
Ah, the good old FDA. You haven't decided what you're gonna do with your FDA?
Not really. No, I, like, honestly was considering something along the lines of, well, it's funny you should, mention it, actually, now that I think about it, because what I have been thinking of is, in fact, non-traditional, shall we say.
Oh, so you're going to become like some sort of super kami guru?
I'm sorry, what now?
Oh, so you're going to become some sort of like super kami guru, right?
Look, as much as I would love to, that's not quite what I had in mind.
I know, I was just doing it for a bit.
Yes. Yeah, what I had in mind actually, you know, now that I think about it, I'm probably gonna like not advertise it on stream, but I will tell you guys about it after stream.
Fair enough. Oh, this is funny. The entire cast of Oppenheimer walked out of the UK premiere when the SAG-AFTRA announced that they were striking.
Funny and also not really surprising.
Yeah, apparently Cillian Murphy just hates doing press, so I'm not surprised he immediately took the opportunity to avoid doing press.
Is it Killian or Cillian? I've heard both.
Cillian. I'm pretty sure it's Cillian.
He's like... Honestly, he is kind of what you think of when you think of like actors in the more not melodramatic, but in the more dramatic sense, right? Like,
yeah,
he very much does it for the craft and just like lives in a cave the rest of his life.
Honestly, good for him.
Look,
That's
no,
him living
I like,
his best life.
Like, I respect it immensely. Like that's he's living the dream, really.
Yeah, no, exactly. Living his best life.
Just like, he only picks like really solid projects.
Mm-hmm.
He's basically good in everything he's in.
Mm-hmm.
And he just doesn't interface with the gross parts of the community as much.
Mm-hmm. Oh my god. You want to hear a very poorly worded short Oppenheimer review?
Oh no.
I won't read it if you don't want me to.
No, I want to. The oh no was an oh no of like...
Alright. This is by The Atom. Christopher Nolan's masterpiece, a bold, tragic look inside humanity's darkest hour. Riveting, world-class performances, and breathtaking imagery that blows a load of emotion inside you. Not just another biopic.
Oh god. Look.
Oh my.
I refuse... Yeah, I refuse to believe that was unintentional. But at the same time, it's exactly the sort of thing that would be unintentional if you think about it.
Yeah, no. I'm half of the opinion that they had no idea what they're doing. They just thought it sounded cool and just was like, let's do this.
Why did you do that to me? Why would anybody do that?
I almost wonder if it's like... Do you think it's a language barrier issue? Like, is it not their first language?
No, it's from I'm pretty sure it's a sci-fi magazine.
Well,
Yeah.
no, but is it not the... It may not be the reviewer's first language.
I don't know. I didn't see who wrote the review. I just saw that the magazine it was published in. Yeah, no. I am very happy with all the solidarity that we are seeing between the WGA and SAG-AFTRA.
Mm-hmm.
Especially with the Directors Guild just, fucking off as soon as they got a deal that was remotely appealing to them.
Yeah, that's really the worst part of it, but the
directors were always going to be the least likely to strike.
Yeah.
They kind of
The
already have a
directors
very
are-
secure place in Hollywood as it is, comparatively
that
speaking.
is that's really the issue, isn't it? Is like the directors have always been kind of like in a position of relative privilege.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, no, it's like the directors. They're not as bad as the Producers Guild, because the Producers Guild is full of, shitheads. But yeah, no, the Directors Guild is not all that ideal, because compromise immediately type of thing.
Yeah, the director's basically like, that's the thing is like the issue is that the issue is in many ways, directors have a lot more to lose
Mm-hmm.
because you kind of need, like, unless you're like stupidly wealthy, you can't start as a director.
Mm-hmm.
A director is something you have to kind of like work your way up towards, and it's like we talked about this principle before. Is like anytime you have struggled up from the top, you realize how much you have to lose, and as a result, are kind of just like much more risk. Tend to be much more risk averse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I almost get that if it weren't for the fact that, it's just kind of like a pretty shitty thing to, just ditch people like that.
Oh no, like I'm not disputing that at all. It's like it's very much not okay, but like the fact remains that I can at least understand the psychology of it. But yeah, the I I I don't know how to feel about biopics.
You mean biopics?
Look, we don't need to have this discussion. We really don't.
I know. I'm just pointing it out for shits and giggles.
Yeah.
We do not have to have the discussion at all. I like mispronouncing words too.
You mispronounce a lot of words, seeing as you speak American rather than English.
He's got you there, Mel. Or the Jack.
Don't you put that evil on me!
I can say English words however I wish.
No, you can't. The language is English. I am English, therefore it is my opinion that matters, as per the Dresden Files.
Your opinion does not stop me from mispronouncing words.
Okay, now you're just like, that's just too much.
Is it? It's never too much.
But yeah,
Too much would be peppering in French words.
let's not even get into that nonsense. It is one thing that I have been thinking on to some degree of rigor, is that like I kind of just don't get them.
Yeah, what now?
Look, I don't want to say the word because we'll just get back into this like loop, but like biographical pictures.
Mm-hmm.
I don't get them. In the sense that I don't really understand the appeal of over dramatizing a person's life to the degree that those tend to do.
Well, some of it is just like a creative team wanting to, work with something that's already an established story that people would be familiar with because, it's real life history and just putting their own spin on it for whatever reason. And also sometimes it's just like really fun.
But it's just like it makes me feel uncomfortable sometimes because the degree of dramatization often is something of a disservice to the people involved.
Oh, well, most certainly, yeah. I can't disagree with you there.
And they tend to like romanticize these people's lives in a way that is almost what's the word I'm looking for? Disrespectful to the suffering they've had to go through in many ways. Like, I think I crystallized this
caused as well.
Yes, obviously. Though I do wonder about Oppenheimer specifically is that don't get me wrong, he definitely knew what he was getting into, but I do wonder how much, like, with the Manhattan Project in general, right? Like, there is definitely a very meaningful question of consent with regards to the Manhattan Project.
Mm-hmm.
Which I'm sure smarter people than I have discussed this at length. But it is true that, like, it's very difficult to identify just to what degree people were willing participants of the Manhattan Project.
One has to assume at least some of them were willing, if for no other reason than for the science of it.
Yes, but at the same time, like, I'm sure a lot of them were maybe not coming at it from a... I'm not trying to defend them, I'm just, like, trying to understand what... Yeah. Because, like, I'm sure for a lot of them, it was coming from a place of sort of... not really knowing the full consequences and repercussions.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
I mean, I do think the only one who should really be blamed for the nuclear bombings is
Truman.
Truman?
Because he authorized it.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the thing. At the end of the day, Truman's the one who basically ordered the whole thing to go off. And the nuclear bombs were going to be developed by someone at some point with the level of technology that had been, accessed at that point. And based off of, a lot of... I'd much rather be the US than the Soviet Union or Nazi Germany that developed it first.
To be fair, I don't think it would have been Nazi Germany.
No, it was definitely between the US and the Soviets.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if nothing else, with the in the case of the Soviets specifically, I'm sure that it wouldn't have been as secure a situation as the US for the simple reason of at least the US had to maintain a certain veneer of democracy and not being totalitarian.
Mm.
Whereas that's not really nearly as much of an issue for
Good old Joey Stalin now.
no.
I think he threw that one away with probably the first Purge. I mean, it does allow me to bring up one of my more amusing historical stories of Truman trying to brag about having subtly
The nukes.
brag about having developed the nukes. Meanwhile, fucking Stalin knew about it before Truman did because of all the spies.
Mm-hmm. I mean, part of the reason Stalin knew before Truman did was because, Roosevelt's the one who put the plan in action, but he died in office, so Truman did not know shit because Roosevelt kept his vice president out of it. Actually, I think Truman was actually only vice president for, like a month before, Roosevelt died. Because he was, because the VP before Truman, I believe, was kicked off the ticket for a scandal, maybe? I don't remember the details. But, Roosevelt's VP for most of his presidency was not Truman.
Yeah, January to April 1945, he was the vice president.
Hmm.
He was preceded by Henry A. Wallace.
And Wallace was kicked off the ticket. I don't know why.
Obviously, I'm getting this from Wikipedia, so take it.
With the requisite grain of salt, yes.
Yeah.
Anyway, but we're back to the subject of the dramatized documentary films about people's lives. I think the one that really crystallized the opinion for me was Alan Turing as portrayed by good old Benny Combs.
Ah, yes, Ben Kumquat.
I still think it's very funny that the two main leads of the Doctor Strange series are both named Benedict.
Yes.
It's just like a funny coincidence.
It is.
And the fact that Benedict Wong plays Wong is even funnier.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Yes! Absolutely love Wong. He's great.
He's he is the reason I say they could have made the Ancient One an actual Asian person without being horrifically offensive.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because they did it with Wong. They turned a horrifically offensive character into a character who is still Asian but not horrifically offensive.
And also kind of beloved because
Yes.
Wong is one of the most popular MCU characters.
He's like the best. He's like at this point. He's the best remaining cast member of the MCU. Like
To be
almost
fair,
hands down.
I will just play devil's advocate for a second. It was easier to make it was probably easier to make Wong less offensive than to make the Ancient One less offensive. Because the reason why Wong was offensive was because he was a manservant. So all they had to do was make him not a manservant.
They're easy fix, solve.
Yeah,
Well,
that's,
I mean,
it's
he
quite an easy
wasn't
fix.
just a manservant. He was like a racial caricature of a manservant.
Yes.
Again, not that hard to not make Wong a racial caricature by, not making him a manservant and giving him his actual character.
But also just...
There's a lot of loaded tropes involved with the Ancient One and the character being Asian.
True, but I like just like I don't mind. Just like make it someone other than Tilda Swinton. Like I have nothing against Tilda Swinton unless she's been cancelled recently, which actually I think she was.
Not
But,
to my
like,
knowledge.
Was she not anti-vaccine, or was that someone else?
Probably there are a lot of celebrities in Hollywood who are anti-vax for some fucking reason.
Yeah, but like, yeah, like my point is just like you could make just like the Ancient One not a white person. They didn't have to make the Ancient One Asian as well, right? Like there were so many other directions they could have gone other than.
Well,
white
if they
person.
made him black, they would run into the magical Negro trope, which is also loaded with unfortunate
I don't
implications.
think you can say that word even if you're like saying it to talk about the
My
trope.
apologies. My apologies.
Yeah, I'm not.
But if they made him Native American, they would have also run into the magical Native American trope, which also is loaded with unfortunate implications.
Look, I get that there's unfortunate implications, but at a certain point, you have to realize that like
There is
it's
no good
better
option.
to-
There's
no good option, but you should at least like, but like, diversity is better than not for the most part.
I agree.
By the way, I figured out why Wallace was less preferred than Truman.
Was it a scandal? I bet it was a scandal.
So, 3 major things. One, he openly denounced racial segregation in the South. 2,
He openly denounced or endorsed?
denounced.
Oh.
2, he made some apparently quite pro-Soviet statements. Can understand that one. And 3, he was apparently very weird religiously.
Yep, that'll do it.
Well, wait, weird how?
Mysticism weird.
Oh yeah, no. Honestly, he probably could have gotten away with the first and third if he, given the climate, if he hadn't had the second one.
He could have gotten away with at least one of those. The first one would have been the easiest to get away with, honestly.
To be fair, apparently in the first round of like votes, he did actually win. He just didn't get enough for the nomination, and then once the other ones, were basically eliminated for having too few votes, they all went to Truman.
Yep. Makes sense.
Yeah, I just like, but yeah, back to Turing. I haven't seen the entire movie, but like, didn't the movie downplay a lot of the injustices that Turing had to face?
Yes.
I don't know. I haven't seen the movie. I do know that Turing got really, really horribly fucked over because he was gay.
Yes.
He literally was chemically castrated.
Yeah, I
by
remember
the
that.
government.
So I have watched the movie. I haven't watched it for a while because I watched it when it first came out, which was like what 2014.
I think it was like
2015?
2015, 2016.
Yeah,
Maybe a bit
like that.
earlier.
Something like that. So I haven't watched it for a while, but they did not linger on the gay thing.
I am shocked. Shocked, I say.
Yeah, they really didn't linger on that. So. Yeah, I wouldn't say they really, put it this way, they didn't spear the British government or society at the time as much as they could have done. I think, if I recall
As much-
correctly.
As much as they should have done, really.
Yes, as much as they should have done. As I said,
Mhm.
I can't remember 100% because it really was just a fucking while ago.
It honestly, it's very hard to go wrong with poking fun at the British government because a lot of shitty stuff has happened with the British government, like in general.
But yeah, I just like that kind of like I was never really into that genre in general because it's just not my thing. But that kind of turned me off from the genre as a whole, just because
I get that.
yeah, I realized just how much like I had similar feelings about the Stephen Hawking documentary as well.
Documentaries are a different thing though, because documentaries.
Well,
at the very
no,
least-
it wasn't the Stephen Hawking. I call it a documentary, but it was the one with Eddie Redmayne.
Oh, so the biopic.
Yes. So I definitely was not the biggest fan of like.
So on a different note, related to that though, do you think disabled people and characters should be played by disabled actors?
That's a much more tricky question, simply because it's
I know
many
there's issues with accommodation. I know because like sometimes some roles are demanding to the point where a disabled actor might have actual issues because of physical discomfort.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why that's a more questionable thing. But even beyond that, I do think that there are times when there's also just like it's availability issues, right? Like, and by availability I mean like there are often just like perhaps not enough actors in a filling a particular niche that would be required, and like there's just like it's one of those things that's more complicated than it seems at first glance, because like obviously obviously diversity is important, but there are practical considerations that make it a much more complicated question.
Yeah, no, I can see that. I was just posing the question because I was curious what your take on it was.
Yeah, so like, yeah, I like as a person who is like medically and legally disabled, I can definitely I've definitely thought about this a lot. But like for example, let's take the autism spectrum as an example.
Mm-hmm.
There are just not as many actors who are on the autism spectrum
That we know of, anyways.
that we know of, and like even if there were, the demands of the role, as you said, are also a factor that can be not ideal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, there is also just the flip side of like you have stuff like the inspiration porn of this disabled person, mentally disabled person doing something very inspirational in a movie, and it's like 99.99% of the time it's going to be played by someone who is neurotypical.
Yeah. There's just a lot of questionable elements that are not initially as obvious, but when you think about them you realize, oh, there's practical issues with this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, also like that does remind me a little bit of that one speech by Robert Downey Jr.'s character in Tropic Thunder.
Yes, just don't say the word. in question.
You went full R word. You never go full R word.
Tropic Thunder is a movie that is far better than it has any right to be.
Yeah, I think
And-
part of the reason it is because the tongue is so firmly in cheek for the whole movie.
And I think it's one of the rare movies, it's one of the rare satires that I think might have actually aged better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that
It's
commentary on blackface is like retroactively even more hilarious.
And more like apt. Like it's a movie
Yeah.
that has it's one of the few satires from like the early 2000, like the late
It's actually
2000s.
2008. Yeah.
Yeah, so like the late 2000s. It's one of the only movies from that era, especially in the comedy genre, that's actually like aged quite well.
Mm-hmm.
Like to the point that a lot of like elements of it are more poignant now than they ever have been. And like it has a much better cast than it has any right to as well. But anyway, we have been going for 2 hours and 9 minutes.
Alright, then, yes, we can call it a day. So thank you everybody for watching. Hopefully you've enjoyed us rambling on and on and on. In terms of future stuff, Saturday will be the summer premiere stream for anime. Should be an interesting one. Sunday should be more D&D. And Tuesday and Thursday probably more of this. Thursday might try and get Tales of Rise going again with Gen. But we will obviously discuss that off stream and get back to you. Of course, if you want to find out what it is we're doing before we, when we start streaming, you can follow us here on Twitch or on Twitter at Storytime_net. Otherwise, hopefully we see you on Saturday for the premiere stream. Good night.
Bye-bye.